Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Full Throttle Finance, a financial literacy podcast geared towards taking complex financial topics and breaking them down into fun, relatable discussions. My name is Felicia, and I am the CEO here at Clean Bee Consulting. And with me again is Alli, who is our senior bookkeeper. Together, we focus on revving up the financial foundations for athletes, entrepreneurs, and leaders in business, regardless if you're operating from an established program already or if you're just getting started. We're here to help you make small shifts that will drive better financial performance. Today, we are going to piggyback on last week's episode, and we're going to continue to discuss what our first year anniversary as a consulting firm looked like.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the metrics and everything, but this week we're going to spend a little bit more time on things that have worked really well for us, and unfortunately some of the things that may not have worked as well for us.
Straight line emoji
Right.
face.
So let's start with some of the items that are like positive so we can kind of break the ice. We can talk with our listeners about some of the positive things we experienced surrounding contracts.
Okay. Contracts. So I would say overall, there were mostly goods that came out of contracts in our first year of business. I think for service industry jobs specifically, contracts really, really matter. But I will admit that I did not want to put contracts in place when I first started, when the firm was just me as Felicia as the freelancer, right? I didn't want to put strict stipulations in place because I didn't know realistically what I was growing the firm to be, and two, I didn't want to lock myself into a contract working with somebody that I didn't necessarily want to work
Contracts
with.
can be kind of scary, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. And I come from working with another firm who locked in annual contracts, and I just never felt like annual contracts were the right fit for this type of service industry. I understand it guarantees the revenue, and that way you have more to budget and plan off of. But again, I think that led to staying in relationships that we didn't need to necessarily stay into. And that's not what I wanted for our firm and for the business that I was building at the time. Another reason why I didn't really develop them was because a lot of the contracts were coming from Upwork, which in its own is a contract every single time I accepted a proposal. So I didn't really need it. But for those clients that I was securing outside of Upwork, that was a direct relationship or a direct networking connection, building the contracts was laborsome. There's a lot involved in it. And I didn't have the capacity and didn't want to put the capacity into establishing them at first. But I found through social media the contract club with Not Average Law, who is the same legal firm that we used for our trademark and getting our trademark all registered. They actually had, at the time, it was a super good deal, and it is a lot less money than it is now. But I still feel like it is totally a valid expense at this point. But they have a contract club, which is basically a database filled with pre-templated contracts for almost every industry you can imagine, and for any type of job that you could imagine, or any podcast guest contract or anything like that. And so I think it's a one-time fee to join the contract club, which is still, like I said, it's a game changer if you're somebody who is like us, who literally have to have these contracts in order to outline the terms of agreements with our clients. But it was really the game changer for us because I was able to levy a contract from there and then kind of reformatted it a little bit more to tailor specifically to what we do with both Clean Bee Consulting and with Full Throttle Finance, right? We have one that's specific for our motorsport clients. We have a different template that is specific for all of our other industries that we work with too. So at first I would say the labor was intimidating, but Braden and his contract club at Average Law Firm really changed the game and made that this really big scary thing on our list was literally, oh, it's done. Now that's easy. And now we have all of our contracts that we need moving forward for all of our clients.
Do you have or you go access it on a regular basis? How does that work?
Yeah, I think it's in my own personal vault, which is why you don't have access to it because you don't really need our contracts. But yeah, it's basically I go to a specific website and I log in, and then he's got links to every contract that you could imagine. For me, I just went with the bookkeeping one, maybe added a little bit of extra stuff that I wanted to see in there, or omitted some of the things that I didn't think really pertained to us, or changed some of the wording around like how long I wanted the contract to go on for, so on and so forth. And so like to piggyback on contracts, like I mentioned, I've worked with firms in the past that like to do 12-month contracts, especially if it's like something that's like a retainer service where it's the same amount of money every single month for this guaranteed scope of work. It just makes sense to do 12-month contracts usually because, again, you can project that income for a full year. But I didn't like that. And so one change in our contracts that I really am still to this day in huge favor of, that I really love most. I don't know what the right way to say that, but we do 90-day trial periods a lot of the time. So before we even get a contract from a client, like I'll capture an email or something like that and do a blended rate, right? So, the way that we usually build our retainers for clients here at Clean Bee Consulting with Full Throttle Finance is that we have 4 different tiers depending upon what the type of service we're providing. Is it bookkeeping? Is it payroll? Is it financial reporting? Or is it consulting? And then we also have tiers for the size of your business. If you're small, if you're a medium, or if you're a large size business, we have different hourly rates for those 4 different categories. So generally, when we try to get our clients onto retainers, we'll calculate their scope of work for what they're going to need and where it falls into that small, medium, large, and into those 4 buckets, right? And that's how we get our retainer prices. But it's really hard to guesstimate what those retainer prices are going to be ahead of times. So one thing that's really worked well for us is before we get that signature on that contract, we like to do a 90-day period with our clients sometimes where we take that bookkeeping, payroll, financial reporting, and consulting rate, and we find the average rate between those 4 buckets of what they're going to need, and we charge them that blended rate for actual hours worked. And what we do is we actually track what we're doing during that 90-day trial period. And so that way, when we come back to them in 90 days with the retainer, it's like, well, this is over the last 3 months, this is the actual, number of hours that we spent on bookkeeping. This is the actual number of hours that we spent on payroll. This is the actual number of hours we spent consulting you, which may or may not be what the client was expecting. But it helps us, A, secure more accurate retainers, and B, it helps with the client understand what their actual needs are. A lot of the times, right, they come to us thinking, I only need 3 hours of bookkeeping a month. But they don't understand that payroll is separate from the reporting, which is separate from the consulting that we do. And in reality, if you need 3, you probably need 5 to 6, if we're being honest on, and that's 5 or 6 of hours of professionals doing the work too, not 5 or 6 hours of maybe the business owner doing bookkeeping work when that's not their specialty or their trade, So a lot of the times that 90-day window worked really, really well for us because we didn't have clients fighting us when it came down to what the actual retainer amount would be. And then we weren't out any money, right? We were getting paid an average rate for actual hours that we worked. And then we have the data to back up the retainer for what they're going to need moving forward. And 2, what that 90-day period also allowed us to do, right, was find the clients that weren't the right fit for us. Because if it takes 90 days to get all of the pieces for the puzzle so that we can even get in there to do your bookkeeping, I'm sorry, but it's probably just not going to work out in the long run, right? And another thing I think that really worked well for us was the flexible contract terms. We have a 30-day cancellation notice in our service agreements, and that works both ways. 30 days just gives either party enough time to accommodate or to just make changes to maybe their own labor force or something like that. It was just an easy way for both parties to be able to exit the clause if they were feeling like it wasn't the right fit, or like if money just didn't allow for our level of service, like if we were maybe too expensive, like they thought they could afford us and that they thought that they wanted to hire us, but maybe it's straining them a little bit too much right now. They want to put it on pause or they want to exit the agreement. We just wanted to make that flexible on both sides of the spectrum so that it was fair.
Which is always so much more comfortable in a situation. If you can't afford us right now, you don't feel like you're tied into something, or, whatever the case is. It's nice to have that flexibility.
Right? We work with small businesses with sometimes small budgets, and we're cognizant of that, right? Like maybe right
Yep.
now is not the right time. I don't want you to overextend yourself because you've committed in writing to an agreement that maybe you couldn't fulfill your end of the bargain to. So I also think that we said no to opportunities that just weren't the right fit for us, right? Maybe industries that we maybe don't have like the most exposure into, or that we've never worked with before. We work with a big network of other bookkeepers. One of them actually maybe is a better fit for you, and I would much rather refer you out to somebody that's going to take care of you than force you into our bubble of our systems and our processes that maybe aren't the right fit for you. So I think that was a big one too, is that 90-day period just like kind of allowed us to be like yes or no without
Yeah.
having that stringent contract in place. And two, like not having those like really firm restrictions around our contracts allowed us to delve into, I would say, unconventional tasks that we do outside of the bookkeeping scope of work for clients, right? Like for some of our clients, since we have become contract pros, I feel like we manage their own contract workflows and their own service agreements. We've helped them build, contracts for both their service agreements and for their contractors that we basically do 99% of the work for, and then we send it out for digital signature. We capture the digital signature on both sides of the spectrum, and then we save it into their database. And two, it's allowed us to delve into like more executive assistant type work / maybe like an organizational coach scope of work, I would say, which is always something that I've thought a lot about doing, but like I never like solicited that as necessarily a service that we provide for clients, So like having that flexibility around contracts really allowed us to get creative in our first year of business, and I think that's a good thing.
I think it's a great thing. We're not just in a little box. You can come to us with your problems and we can help you with them. So Felicia, in the part 1 last week, you mentioned a few times about how Upwork was the driving factor behind our firm's early success. Do you want to share a little bit more about how to become successful on that platform?
Yeah, it's not easy. I'll say
Yeah,
that.
I can imagine.
But I think there was a lot of things that were going for me. I think the time of year that I entered into the Upwork space was perfect. It was literally coming right off of the tax deadline. So I got, people with extensions. I got people that were newly elected S Corp statuses that were coming. So I think the timing had a little bit to play with it. But within 2.5 months, I climbed to the top 10% of freelancers on Upwork.
I
And like
was
that's
shook when you told me that.
I know, and that's global too. That's not even like
It's
United
crazy.
States-based freelancers. That is everyone across the globe. And my suggestions, I will stand by Upwork for getting started in freelancing. But you do need to be very specific in the way that you work Upwork if you want to actually make the proposals worth a damn, I would say. So first and foremost, to find the opportunities, you want to pick the keywords that are specific to your industry or the types of jobs that you want. So for us, I was searching things like payroll and bookkeeping and like tax strategy specifically were the 3 that I was searching. And I was searching them every couple of hours during the day and even into night. Because again, if you're looking to work with people across the United States, you've got 3 time zones at least that you've got to take into consideration if you want to be able to nail clients more easily, I'd say. And on top of that, I would only search for US jobs. So there's like a little on the side, like I think it's like on the left-hand side, there's a little menu. You can check mark a box to only show United States jobs. So that way it took out all of the international stuff. I only wanted to work with US-based companies. And I only submitted proposals. So like if you're not familiar with Upwork, what you do is you would go to the search, you would search for bookkeeping, you'd check mark only US jobs, and then you would see a whole bunch of job postings basically. And you can see, under 5 proposals sent already, or between 15 and 25 proposals. Like there's a range under each one that shows you how many other people are like basically competing for that job as you are. And so you can open the job posting, you can get to know a little bit more about the company. It'll usually tell you what the company's name is, kind of like what the job responsibilities that they're looking for are. And so I made it a goal to only submit proposals that had less than 5 proposals submitted already, because I found that if you were one of those first 5 or 6 that were submitted, you had like something like a 75% greater chance of getting a response back from somebody. Like imagine if you were the job poster and like you posted it and you gave it a day and then you came back and you had over 25 proposals.
You're going to look at like the first 5,
Yeah.
And then get overwhelmed, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my rule of thumb, was that I wouldn't waste a proposal, because you have to use connections to submit proposals. And your connections cost money on Upwork. And so I didn't want to waste money just blindly sending proposals. That's why I was very tactical when it came to it, I feel like. And a proposal is basically like, this is my background, this is what I can help you with, this is the rate of pay that I'm asking for. So it's really just those 3 criteria. And then it's up to the poster to determine if they want to just hire you based off that, or if they want to have like a Zoom call with you or something like that. I had it go both ways. I had people just hire me straight out of proposal, and then I didn't actually talk to them on the phone for like maybe a week or 2 after. They are still a client of ours to this day. And then I've also had ones that maybe wanted to do 1 or 2 interview processes, let's say. And so once you submit a proposal, you need to watch your inbox like a hawk. And as soon as somebody who posts a job responds to you, you want to jump on it and you want to just respond to them. Even if it's something generic, like, yes, I would love to meet Tuesday. Let me check my calendar real quick to make sure that I can meet in this specific time frame or whatever it is. But they want people who are responsive. And I'll let you know that if I waited more than an hour to respond to them, I almost never heard a response back. But if I got a response out to them within 5 or 10 minutes of them contacting me for my proposal, that was the best shot of like them still being online, them going, hey, this person's serious. And then, the proposal usually got offered and accepted to me after that point. So turn your notifications on your phone, turn your notifications on your email, and as soon as they drop you a line in your messages, make sure you go and message them back as soon as possible. And then just know that you are going to submit proposals that are going to go nowhere. It's just going to happen. There's some fake job postings. Some people get cold feet after they put the listing out. There's a million reasons why, but not every single proposal I submitted got viewed or accepted or moved further. But I would say that like 80% of them did, using this streamlined workflow. But also too, like just like an algorithm on social media, Upwork is very similar. So once you've got a few open contracts that are performing well and consistently, if you utilize their like advertise your profile, which is where they use some of your connects to like drop your profile in when people are searching bookkeeper or searching tax strategist, you'll start to receive invites directly from people to either apply, like, hey, I saw your Upwork on profile, I'd like for you to apply to this open job listing. Or they'll just contact you directly and say, hey, I like your profile, I want to hire you.
That's
do you
cool.
have availability to take me on? And I've had it on both accounts. I had a short-term contract that found me and just wanted to hire me right off the bat. And I've had a short-term contract. Actually, no, it's actually still a current it's a current contract. We just don't do scope of work for them outside of the quarterly realm, who invited me to like apply and go through that formal process with them. So work can be tricky, but especially if you're starting out, if you follow these guidelines, like I would be surprised if you didn't have some success along the way submitting proposals.
I didn't realize Upwork had an algorithm like that. I like that. Like it makes sense that if you've got stuff performing on there, that it would, they would push you out more because you're obviously doing well. You're obviously able to work with other clients. So
yeah, I mean, I think I had like At one time, I had like 10 contracts going simultaneously, and it felt like I was getting more of these like, hey, are you interested? I found you on Upwork, versus now where I only have a couple of people that are still on Upwork, some of the original contractors. I don't get as many of those drop-ins like, hey, I like your profile kind of a thing. So I think it's like, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like if you're feeding because there's fees on both sides, the employer and me as the freelancer, like they're getting 20% of every single transaction. So I think it's like the more you have with them, the more attractable you are to their business model, because they're getting 20% of every transaction. So I think it would be silly to think there's not some sort of algorithm at play there on the back end. But I would say it took me a full year to like really like understand, like, no, there is an algorithm, and I can see
that pattern.
Exactly. Like just based off of my own work at this point.
So I guess I can lead us into our next topic of networking. I think it's kind of interesting. We've talked about, sending out emails to companies, but in reality, what's the networking and what is it like? What have we actually done networking wise for the firm?
Yeah, it's like every time we get a little bit hesitant and like a little bit like, oh, we should probably like outreach and do our own marketing, like 3 more networking opportunities come up. Right. And it's like, so we've been sitting on a couple of lists that we've been making for like some local area businesses and business models we want to work with that we haven't used them. Right.
No, because last time I got a spreadsheet done for her. She comes back to me and she's like, oh, so we've got a couple more of your clients. So yeah, I don't know if we're going to have time for that list that you can buy.
Which, I mean, we keep them, and I keep punting that task every other week that it comes up when I keep punting it, just because you don't know when you're going to need it. So I don't like, it's definitely good to prepare in that aspect, but like marketing, I feel like we haven't had to do so much of. And I think that we have an untraditional viewpoint about marketing, which maybe I'll get into in a little bit. But as far as the networking goes, I think networking outside of Upwork has been our second biggest revenue generator, right? And it's been fun networking, at least from the CEO aspect. I've really loved diving deep into the local community here in my surrounding area in Washington. I remember there's one very memorable experience that I have. And honestly, I didn't even really go to the event with the mindset of necessarily networking to build my clientele base or just to deepen my roots in the community. I went to support our local restaurants and our local distillery, right? So it was last fall, De La Soil, which is a farm-to-table restaurant that just opened here this past week here in Kenmore, Washington, and Tuckmuck Farm, which is a local farm here in Woodinville, Washington. They had this hoop harvest community dinner at Copperworks Distilling here in Kenmore, which is a distillery that's been open here for a couple of years. And it was 2 very long tables of what De La Soil's farm to table fare would look like once their restaurant concept actually became a real restaurant concept, because they just been doing the pop-ups every couple of weekends at that point out in the backyard of the distillery. And all of the proceeds from that dinner went to Tuckmuck Farms so that they could purchase equipment so that they could keep growing fresh fruits and vegetables here for the community, right? The whole night really encouraged community, and we made a number of good friends and connections from that night, because we were forced. It was just me and Jacob, and we were kind of forced to just pick a seat at these long community
family
tables.
style.
Exactly. And get to know the people around you. And we ended up networking with a couple of people that actually worked for this local city governments in the area, which was really cool. Some of them had their own consulting businesses and whatnot. We have multiple connections that have transpired from that night. We're actually servicing some of these people for their bookkeeping now, and some of them are on our lists of, we want to do their bookkeeping, how do we land them, kind of a thing. But it was my first big girl moment, I would say. Hey, you're building this business yourself and you get to be yourself, and people actually like you for you and not for the business you're representing. Because I didn't go there with the mindset of promoting the business. I went there for the mindset of community and gathering and supporting local businesses because that's what I love to do. So like that was kind of like my big aha moment that like diving deep local was where I wanted to take the business next. We didn't have any clients in Washington at that point. And, between that experience and just the things that transpired afterwards, we really started to grow roots here in this part of Washington. And I think another part of networking that like I was maybe timid or shy to at first was asking people for introductions to others. I often misread people, and oftentimes people misread my intents. So I think like one thing I've learned over the last year is that I need to be more direct in asking for what I want, because like what's that old saying, like a closed mouth doesn't get fed. Like that's basically like kind of how I see it. So I would say I'm less afraid now to ask somebody to introduce me to somebody else that I want to work with, or at least like somebody that I want them to know that this is what I do. Not necessarily that I'm going to pitch you for services, like, do you need it? But like, hey, this is what I do. This is what I'm an expertise in. This is what I want to do. Do these things resonate with you? If so, like, I'm always here kind of a thing. And we've definitely grown clients from those types of relations and from those types of introductions. So yeah, networking, I think, is like a big one that has worked for us in a good way.
Well, and it goes back to kind of what we've talked about before of like, we are working with people who want to work with us. And this makes
Yep.
it very easy because they already like who you are. And it's easy to,
Yeah. Can't make cover.
and I think you shared a little bit in part one about how goal setting hasn't really been something that you've been doing, something that you've been putting at the forefront for this firm. Mm. Do you want to elaborate more on how you still track our business success if you're not goal setting? Because we've talked about it like in our previous episodes, we've talked about how you need to set goals, but we don't really.
Yeah, I know, right? It seems a little hypocritical. But I would say that there's a difference in budgeting and goal setting. Let's say we definitely budget every single month, which means that we estimate what the hourly work for our hourly clients is going to be. We calculate what the revenue we expect on one-off projects is going to be. We tally up all of our retainer revenues, the ones that are leaving, the ones that are coming in, the ones that are consistent. And this gives us a small target to track against, I would say. It allows us to check the box that we've met our payroll obligations, that we've met our, owner's pay kind of obligations, that we've met our tax obligations. Like, it gives me the peace of mind that I need to be able to handle one-off spending as it comes up throughout the week, let's say, or throughout the month. And so our overhead expenses too are pretty minimal and rather static. So everything's easy to project. So no, we're not saying we want to hit X dollar amount in revenue. We're going, this is what our revenue is to work with. These are what our expenses are. Are we in the positive? Are we in the minus? Do I need to put money into the business this month? Or are we going to be able to float by and coast on? Or put money into savings because we're going to exceed our revenue, exceed our overhead expenses, and be able to put some away for a rainy day. So that's why I say, like, we don't goal set, but we're not flying blind and we're not flying by the seat of our pants either. Like, we know what's going to come. And like, honestly, we're within 10% of that target every single month because we're looking at it every month. It's not something we set in January for a budget and then it's like in June, it's not anything like what we set in January. Like, we're literally looking at things a month at a time. And I usually sit down to do that calculation somewhere in week 3 to the beginning of week 4 of every month. So probably next week, at the end of the week, I will sit down and kind of do this projection for June so that I can see what our revenue is going to look like for June. And so obviously we spent a lot more money than our normal expense allotment, I would say, our normal overhead expenses over the last month or so with all of the travel and with the retreat and all of that stuff. But that's why we use profit first. we use the profit first method to budget for our retreat expenses ahead of time so that we're not dipping into like debt to make that retreat happen necessarily. We budget for our traveling and our networking expenses. I've got a conference coming up that I budgeted for at the end of last year so that I could do it this year. So that wasn't even something that's going to dip into this month's revenue because I've already paid for it and I'd already calculated for it beforehand. We use Profit First to budget for sponsoring Kayla, right? We did the budgeting and we saw what money we would be calculating to pay in taxes to the government. And I said, I don't love that number. So how can we take that number and reduce what we're paying to the government by still advancing our business objectives and our business goals?
That aligns with our business plan, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like we wanted to make sure that our money was going back into something that was going to further the mission of our company, which is to put back into the youth and to expand the knowledge of financial information and to help people understand finances better, right? So we use Profit First to budget for that, essentially. Budgeting our taxes, budgeting our payroll, budgeting for owner's pay / my own home office rent. Like all of these decisions were made because we were doing the Profit First method and utilizing that in our everyday expenses and revenue goals / budgeting that we do. So yes, I do think for certain business models and business structures, goal setting is probably a mandatory thing that you need to implement. But for us and where we're at in growing this firm currently, we benefit more from month-to-month budgeting versus setting goals and saying, this is our target revenue. Like the revenue has just come and it has exceeded our expectations. So for me, it would just be like creating a goal just to create it, right? And that's not just doing something to do it is not something that sits well for me. But being informed, that speaks a whole lot to me.
But you're still looking at it month by month, so it's still like a very hands-on thing. It's just something a little bit easier for our business model, I would say.
Talk to me in year 3. We might be goal setting. Fair, right? For now, it works really well. Yeah.
So we talked about the good in contracts, but there were also some things about contracts that didn't work for us. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. Multi-month retainer contracts right out the gate. The hours are just a lot harder to nail down. And when you jump straight into a retainer straight out the gate, like you don't get that 90-day window to like vet if the client is really going to mesh well with you and your systems and your workflows and your processes. I think we've only done that with a handful of clients where we've done the retainer straight out the gate, and those contracts have all felt clunky the whole time to me. So looking back at a year later and, all the things that did and did not work well, I think I still lean towards that 90-day blended rate to figure out what the real services are going to be needed for that client, and that 90-day period to make sure that it's a good fit for both people on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, because, each party gets to be happy with the price and with the services. And like you said, it's not clunky.
Yeah. And then I think something that will probably change too with future contracts moving down the road, which it takes something that I had on a someday maybe plate of getting our contracts into a new program called Anchor. I put that on the back burner for a while, but I think like after looking down and, doing both these podcasts, it's probably something I want to bump up on the list a little bit, is that we have not required payment ahead of services being provided, and we have not put in a clause that we will automatically charge payment methods on files as of a certain date. And I hadn't put that in because honestly, up until like December of 2024, I never had an aging collections for receivables for the business. I never had a problem with clients paying us when it came time to pay us. But going into the very end of 2024 and carrying on into 2025, we've carried large AR balances that have really drastically impacted our own firm's cash flow. And, it's thrown in a wrench into our plans, right? Because I have payroll obligations and I'm not lessening your hours because I have a contract with you, but your payroll costs still have to be met, right? And so I've had to dip in and put some of my own money into the business to make ends meet while chasing these receivable accounts that we've never had a problem before. But all of that was just like running off of good faith. And I think that that was great for a while and it served us for a while. But I would change that with contracts moving forward. I don't necessarily disagree with like delivering the service and then invoicing for the service. Like I'm still okay with that, but I need a payment method on file and I need a clause in the contract that says that we'll charge by X day once we've invoiced for the services and that you have to have that payment method on file that's
It's
how
just
most
reasonable.
firms do it.
Yeah.
It's how most firms do it. And yeah, sometimes you just have to make those decisions. But yeah, I'd say those are the two things really that were bad per se when it comes to contracts over the last year. Lessons we learned.
Yeah, and saying goodbye to clients is both a good and bad thing for us. Do you want to talk a little bit more with listeners about these difficult decisions and things that you have to do that kind of suck?
Yeah, this one was a really important, like one of those things that you rewrite on repeat, like so that it sticks, that I didn't want to work with shitty people. Like in the past, I was forced to stay in and work with toxic business owners because it wasn't my business and it wasn't my decisions to make. It was somebody else's business that I was building, and I had to fall into line with what they deemed the way to move forward, right? And so I made a promise to myself from the very beginning that I wouldn't work with shitty people. And, one of our early clients really helped me stand my ground in this aspect. Not only was the business model a complete chaotic mess, and if you listen to last week's episode, I'll let you know this is the talent agency that I talked about. So if you're wondering if you should ever take on a talent agency as a client, there's a lot of things that you probably want and need to know, and we should probably get on a phone call to discuss some of those things so that you're well aware before you get yourself into that. But the business model was very chaotic, and the business owner wanted to do things that I ethically did not feel comfortable doing. And the business owner was an extreme micromanager, I would say. They paid their staff the absolute bare minimum while operating in one of the absolute largest and highest paying minimum wage cities that there is in the United States currently. So paid them the very bare minimum, didn't really treat them super great, and then asked the absolute most out of them in those job capacities, which all of those are just things that don't really resonate with me and the core values that I hold and that the clients we work with hold as well too, right? That business owner treated the relationship with me more as a I worked for them instead of I worked with them kind of a relationship. And because they were so involved in their own accounting system, things would get changed quite often, and then the fingers would be pointed back to me for blame when it was not something that I would necessarily have touched. So it was a whole bunch of red flags that really I just was like, no, like this isn't why I got into business to do this, right? So that client really showed me that the 90-day trial period worked. Because when I first came on board, everything was like rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. And then it was just add, and take on the pay. And with all of that and all of the issues I was running into administratively with them, like it was just I had to cut them loose. And they definitely did not like that I was the one that was ending the service contract, but I had to put it behind me that this was business and that wasn't the right fit for me, and I could not continue to do that. And because of that experience too, we've also let 2 more clients go that just weren't good fits just like this. Maybe not for all of the same reasons, but we could just tell within that 90-day period either how responsive or unresponsive they were, and kind of if they dragged their feet through the mud on doing things or not. Like, really, that whole experience with the talent agency kind of set the precedence of like, no, Felicia, you're going to stand your ground. You're going to stick up for yourself, and you're only going to work with people that align with us at the core value level.
I remember when I first started, you told me something to that effect of like, I really just want to work with clients who want to work with us, who want to provide us the documentation, who want to, when we reach out to them, they're on top of things and they want to do this. That's who we want to work with. And I think you've held really true with that. And it, the people that don't, we just split our ways. So
yeah, I've said it quite a few times, but I think it's a good place to say it again. Like, we can't want it more than you want it as the business owner. So it's got to be equal wants, or the business owner's got to want it more than us to keep us kind of, right there with them.
Exactly. All right. So Felicia, let's talk a little bit about software. What have you learned about forcing clients into a universal software platform or streamlining?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, right, all of our clients would use the same types of programs so that we have all of these nice tidy workflows that we can kind of like apply one to the other, easy to SOP and all of that. And I get the appeal of that, but like the old firm I used to work with, they like to get everybody on the same financial report system, the same payroll system, same receipt management system, so on and so forth. But the more and more I work with small business clients directly in a consulting capacity, the more and more I don't love that for them. Yeah, it makes things nice for us administratively, but like, it kind of seems like an easy way out, right? Like, we're consultants. And two, we always want to keep learning new software, in my opinion, because each client is different. Every business is different. And ultimately, what we try to do as consultants is find the best fit for that client and their budget. And that means the softwares that we use are not going to be cookie cutter options across the board for every business, right? And I don't care about the referral money either. Really don't care. There's one program, right, that I didn't even get approved for to be a referral partner for. I'm still going to refer that client out to use that program software because that's the software that makes the absolute most sense for them and their business and where it's growing to, right? And so I think that those are some of the blockades that maybe some of the other firms that I've worked with in the past, like they siloed themselves because they wanted everybody to get into this cookie cutter program when really the part of consulting that matters most is that tailored effect that you give to each individual client for what their business needs. It truly, for us, it's what software is going to deliver the best results for the clients and make things the most efficient for everybody that's involved. In the beginning, I did try to streamline softwares a little bit, but it honestly, if I had forced myself to continue going down that route, it would have left me saying no to some of the best opportunities that have come up in this first year of business for us as a firm in general. And so by saying yes to maybe some softwares that I wasn't so familiar with, I got to expand my own comfortability and my own knowledge into some other platforms that normally I probably would have passed on based on prior tendencies. So ultimately, this increases my knowledge too, because I have more tools under my belt that I can use and pull out to find the best fit for the next client that comes down the road or the next opportunity that one of our current clients decides to engage in.
Definitely. And I'm gonna switch gears a little bit here. And I wouldn't necessarily say that this is our last topic, but it's been one of the hardest things that we have gotten into. And let's talk a little bit about social media and the struggles we face with social media marketing as a firm, because social media is hard, man.
Yeah, social media is hard, and I think we're finding that we don't love it all of the time. Sometimes it's super fun. A lot of times it's not super fun. But yeah, so social media, I think big thing there was like lack of visibility before Alli came on board, right? Even still to this day, like the Instagram is still my personal Instagram. I didn't want to create a business Instagram account because I
You
was
don't want
just
to have to
another
start from
social media.
scratch.
Don't want to start from scratch. Don't want another account to manage either. Like already have enough, right?
Yeah.
But I think like the lack of visibility that we had was a problem, and that's what started us on the social media path to begin with. And I think one of the struggles that we run into is that we're trying to make similar content work across multiple platforms where maybe the content isn't received the best on all of those platforms. And we have ebbs and flows for when we actually are inspired to make good content. Let's just be real, right? But it's picking up for sure. Definitely after Road Atlanta, I think we've definitely seen some upticks. Like we got over 2,000 views on YouTube from one short where we talked about golf carts and deductible expenses. So I don't think
People
that
really
that's one
enjoy
of
the
the
golf
things,
carts, man.
right? I don't think that's necessarily like the clip that we thought was gonna hit off on YouTube, but like that's part of the learning process for us is finding out those things. And we don't really have a budget for social media. And two, I think we want to know a bit about social media and marketing before we decide to just like hand over the keys to somebody else to try and do it professionally, right? Like I think we need to know a little bit about the foundation of social media and marketing ourselves before we can bring somebody else into the picture.
Yeah.
And we have to just keep reminding ourselves, I think, too, that we started posting on social media not with the intent necessarily to drive traffic and to build relationships with new clients and for new clients to come out of it, right? We started our social media presence because we needed somewhere where we could build credibility and where we could send clients to, or like when new clients come to our profile, they can see and establish rapport of like, these girls know what they're talking about. And so I think that that's also a little bit of why maybe it hasn't taken off the way we want it to, is because we're literally building credibility in a database right now. And two, like our Revving Up for Financial Success course, right? We've gone through and we've linked out all of the podcast episodes that are additional supplemental information in addition to what's in our course, because that's part of what this podcast is for, is to help us build that credibility and to build that presence. So we have to keep reminding ourselves that it's not just for the likes, right? And the engagement.
And I will say that we're a little different too. You usually have a bookkeeping firm or a consulting firm and they're doing videos about just bookkeeping and consulting, whereas we're kind of doing bookkeeping and consulting with that motorsport twist, which usually doesn't go together. So we're finding our own niche, and we're trying to find a way to make our visibility out there so that we can help our motorsport people, because that's what we're really trying to do here.
And to non-motorsport people too, right? Because still a chunk of our firm clients are not motorsport industry folks too. So, it's all part of the learning process. But I think, like, again, that's why we haven't set goals, like to have X amount of followers or Y number of likes on our posts or whatnot. Like, we're doing it differently. And, in the long run, I think thinking outside of the box and doing things differently has worked. We'll see if this continues to work for us or not. Maybe we'll pivot. Who knows? We'll figure it out. And then I don't think cold calling or pitching services while we're not in person, like, I don't think that's done anything good for us. If anything, it's like completely shut people off and like close the door in our faces, right? Like, I was actually pretty disheartened when we reached out to Numa. We thought it was going to be such a great partnership. We weren't even asking for anything. We just like wanted to have a conversation with them about how getting clean hydration into the motorsport paddock what it could look like for them, like showing Mission Foods and how Mission Foods is all over the Moto America paddock. Like, we just wanted to have a conversation with Numa to show them the same thing. And it was like within 5 minutes of sending the email that it was like, no, thank you, goodbye from the owner.
No, we're good.
And I mean, at least it was the owner, at least, let's say.
Yeah.
That did respond, but it kind of like killed the vibe and killed a lot of confidence. And, responding to people's stories, like about their troubles of being able to stay in the Moto America paddock at the level that they've been competing in the Moto America paddock, I've reached out to them directly via email because I don't want to just like slide into their DMs or anything like that. And, with a very, we want to help you mindset, not even talking dollars or anything. And it's been rough because you just hear crickets back from it. So, I think what I found is that people in certain industries don't really seem to want to make decisions without like an in-person validation. And I think that in-person validation isn't necessarily the pitch of your services, but more so like you as an individual. So I think that that's cold calling is just never going to be. I worked in timeshare, for goodness sake. Like, I should know that that's not something that I like to do, right? No, that doesn't work out. But, you live and learn, which is what we're doing.
So, Felicia, any last words of wisdom for our listeners out there?
Yeah, I say it a lot, but I only say it a lot because it's true. You have to spend money to earn money. And sometimes that means putting your own skin in the game. I was pretty transparent with you, Alli, right? Like when you came full-time into the firm, I was pretty transparent that I was throwing my own money into the business. This is how much I was putting into the savings account, and that it was there to be used as a safety net for us. Like that I had calculated we could run the business off of what we had at the time and what our expenses were, but that we needed to have a safety net in case shit got real, which shit got real.
Yes.
And I think that was an important thing for me to do as a business owner because it helped me hold myself accountable along the way. Every single month, right, I was chatting with you multiple times a month, probably. I was chatting with you about like our own cash flow, each situation, each month, telling you like I'm pulling your payroll from our operating expenses versus from the savings. Like we still have this much in savings, right? And although we did borrow from those reserve funds that I had transferred, from time to time, we managed to pay it back in full for 4 months straight when I did have to borrow it because the cash flow was just like a week or two delayed or something like that. And we only had to dip into that reserve fund, which we did dip into it and we did use 80% of it, which is a little, but it was only due to a few large aging balances from clients that went unpaid, hitting at the same time as retreat planning, as the writer sponsorship. And although we had budgeted all of that from Profit First,
it all just compiled.
Yeah, it just all hit, shit hit the fan at the same time, right? So I'm really happy with that. Like, I honestly am proud that we didn't touch, per se, those funds for the first 4 months that it was in there. And we're going to be able to pay it back now that things are rolling again with our AR collections. But I think that with it being my own money, it really had a big psychological impact on me as an individual. And it definitely helped me spend our money more smartly and be a little bit more lean leading up to the retreat and all of the spending that we were going to do at that point as well, too. So I think it really helped me maximize resources. And I know not everybody has money to put in, but if you are somebody who does have money to put in to your own business, I think having skin in the game it's an educational lesson that you're not really going to get from a textbook or from sitting down and listening to somebody like do a coaching session or something like that.
My dad always said that he didn't want to pay for our college because he wanted us to put our own money into our own college so that we would actually invest in our education. And I think this is a very similar type deal is you have skin in the game. And so you put your heart and your soul into it and it shows.
Yeah, no, I agree with your dad. My mom helped pay college for a while. And I think while she was helping me pay for my college, I definitely didn't take it as serious as I did when I started paying for college for myself. And I got a lot more out of my education once I started paying for myself. So your dad's a smart guy.
And that's probably a good place to wrap it up for our part 2 of our special 2-part firm anniversary segments, where we hope that you found some of these experiences and stories we've shared relatable. And as always, if you found these insights valuable, please like, share, comment, tag, all of the things. We would really appreciate it. It just helps you show support for what we're doing here at Full Throttle Finance. And if you're ever interested in booking services with us, you can Visit our website at www.cleanbeeconsulting.com. That's CLEANBEE consulting.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next Friday as we continue to break down finances with a motorsport twist. We'll see ya.